Well, welcome to Unearthly Upstate. Patreon edition, finally. Sorry about this month being late.
Yes. Better late than never.
We did have something planned, but I just couldn't get around to doing research because it's been a little crazy at work, and when I get home, I just want to play Minecraft. So, yeah.
Things have picked up. Things have been busy with me as well.
Right. All the fun times that. So, we thought we would do another movie television review of a story that takes place in upstate. Now, technically, location doesn't fit my definition of upstate because you can catch a train that's a non-Amtrak train from New York City up to the
So you can
town.
catch a city train up to...
Yes.
And if you can reach it by city train, it's not upstate.
It's not upstate, but at the time the original story, which we're going to be talking about, was written, it was upstate. Because pretty much anything...
Oh, yes, it was considered the boonies.
Anything pretty well north of that was that's where the fur trappers, the German Palatines, and the Native Americans lived. So, Anyway, so I thought we'd discuss one of my favorite Tim Burton films, which is based loosely on one of my favorite stories growing up, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. I think we saw it with the kids in the movie theater, didn't we, the first time? Yeah.
Yeah, we had.
Yeah, the kids were, kind of too small to see it, really, but we knew our boys. They liked it. They weren't scared. They enjoyed it. I know it's one that we usually try to watch once a year at the very least. I enjoyed it for multiple reasons. I am a bit of a Hammer film lover. I'm not a fanatic about the films. I mean, I can't tell you, which actress
Names,
starred.
places.
Yeah. I mean, I love Peter Cushing. I love Christopher Lee, and a lot of the people that worked behind the scenes on Hammer films went
Who's
off
that
and
one
worked.
actress?
The old school Doctor Who.
Yeah. What's the name of that actress? Her last name is Black.
Oh, please. See, that's the thing. I can't name every actress. Although I will say, oh, yeah, I know her from...
Although she was in Black Sunday and a few of those other ones.
I know who you're talking about, but I can't place her name.
Definitely.
Right. But anyway, but the Hammer films have always had a bit of a soft spot in my heart because they were the horror films that were being shown quite a bit on the TV when I was growing up.
Yeah.
But there was kind of something that, I wasn't supposed to see. Thing,
Yeah, there's a...
It was like, Monty Python growing up, too. You giggle at it and then look around at the older people and say, should I giggled? Should they think I know I get what that joke means? And Hammer films were kind of the same way. It's like, I know what's going on here, but I can't let on. So anyway, the Hammer films, like I said, were kind of they were scary, yes. I mean, they were, but they also had that little bit of sexuality to them, which about the time I discovered them, that wasn't something I was supposed to.
I was drawn to the violence.
Oh, and they were violent too. Yeah.
I was just. When I watched a few Hammer films, and I remember during the 70s when those films would come out on TV, and there was a matinee for the afternoons, and they would show these old Hammer films, and they were either Hammer films that were broad general use, they've fallen into general use, or they were very cheap for the stations to just pay a needle drop fee, and that's a broadcast term. You pay a needle drop fee just to get a one-time program aired on your station. Basically.
I'm not sure which Dracula film it is. I think I've seen it once after the very first one I saw. But it ended with Dracula falling into a river near a mill wheel. And I've seen it once after that, but I can't tell you which one it is. Okay, and I bet there's
Is it one of the Jack Palance Draculas?
No, this was a Christopher Lee.
It was a Christopher Lee.
The reason I bring that up is because when they brought back the Death of Saruman, I was so pleased to see that. It was such an homage, not just.
Oh yeah, exactly. Because that was neat, and I was wondering where did I see that? Christopher Lee in relation to Water Wheels.
Yeah. And Christopher Lee is a good segue into Tim Burton's Legend of Sleepy Hollow because he played the judge with those wonderful wooden wings behind him with framing him, looking like the Angel of Death on a...
Always a master of forced perspective is our Tim.
But he looked like the Angel of Death carvings on those old
he does.
New England gravestones.
Okay. He did look like a headstone.
Yeah. So anyway, the story, if I can't believe I should probably give a summary, though you would think everyone knows it, but the basic story is a school teacher comes to Sleepy Hollow by the name of Ichabod Crane. And really, if you think about him, he's not really a likable guy. He's a great school teacher. Mm-hmm. He's a good singer. He's really good with his students. I mean, I'm not saying he's a horrible person.
But personally, he's a goit.
But he is trying to get into society there. He's going after the richest eligible women.
He's a bit of a spiv.
He is a bit of a spiv, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got some very positive traits, but he's got some negative ones as well. Mm-hmm. It's kind of interesting. He's a bit of a coward, and he's also very superstitious. He actually comes into town.
He's got some really personal foibles.
Yeah, he comes into town carrying the history of witchcraft. A book called The History of Witchcraft with him. Which the book is a real book, by the way, the one they mentioned in the story.
Not the other books on the subject.
No. And there he meets Katrina Van Tassel. He starts to woo her, but she already has a beau, Brom Bones, who I guess is, the man's man. I don't know. A lot of renditions, they play him as kind of more muscles than brains, yet it was his smarts that kind of outsmarted Ichabod, because he realized that Ichabod was so superstitious, so he used that as a way to get him into Ichabod where he wanted him, basically.
And they played that up on the Disney cartoon.
They did. The Disney cartoon is very true to the original story. Fun fact, while researching for this, I discovered there is a real Ichabod Crane. And Washington Irving did meet him when they were both up in Sackett's Harbor during the War of 1812. Mm-hmm. And this Ichabod Crane was serving in the United States Marines. No, or was he in the Army at the time? At one point he retired from the Marines and went into the Army. But he was at Sackett's Harbor. And Washington Irving was up there basically with the governor of New York, making sure that, everything was going the way it should, because, we were defending the frontier at that point from, the Canadians.
Those Canucks.
Okay. Yeah, he met Ichabod Crane, the real person there. Mm-hmm. You can look him up, and the name actually stuck. I mean, it's like you find out that, oh, shoot, I can see his face. Mm-hmm. Wrote Christmas Carol.
Charles Dickens.
I keep thinking, I'm going Charles Darwin. No!
Charles Dickens.
Charles Dickens, thank you. Okay, so it's like Charles Dickens got his famous character Scrooge name from a tombstone, a guy named Scrooge. So, interesting. Scroggy, yeah. So,
I think it was Scroggy.
If you have a very unique name, you might end up in a book. Okay, so coming back to Brom Bones, kind of used that his brains and tells this ghost story. They're having this big party, and Ichabod's putting the moves on Katrina, and Brom tells this ghost story about running into the Headless Horseman. Now here's the thing: the Headless Horseman was already a legend in that area, okay? And Brom Bones basically says he outrode the horseman and crossed this bridge, and the horseman disappeared. Mm-hmm. And later that night, there's this big showdown with Ichabod and a Headless Horseman, and Ichabod makes it to the bridge, but the Headless Horseman doesn't disappear. And then it's left open and ended. What happened? Was he killed by the Hessian, the Headless Horseman? Mm-hmm. Was it Brom Bones getting his final revenge? Or did Ichabod just say, F this and take off? I mean, it's left open, and you can basically pick your own ending at that point, whichever one you prefer.
Yep. Don't worry about my baggage. I'll have them sent.
Right. Now, Tim Burton's story. Well, we have Ichabod Crane. We have Katrina Van Tassel. We have the whole Van Tassel family. We have Brom Bones. We even have a Headless Hessian horseman. Mm-hmm. And we do have a showdown at the bridge. We have 2 showdowns at the bridge, if you think about it. Mm-hmm. Okay? But that's where the ends. That's where the similarity ends. In the Tim Burton's version, Johnny Depp plays Ichabod Crane, a constable from New York City who's kind of like a proto-forensic scientist. And I was going through the movie, and people were picking out goofs, and they were really picking on the anachronistic stuff. And I looked upon it this way. This is a fictional movie, dark fantasy movie, based on a fictional story that was based on legends of this one particular town in New York at the certain time, and about 1820s, 1830s. I think anachronisms are the least of your worries.
I'm kidding. We're
Okay.
talking about
Yeah.
a story that has this wraith, basically.
The figure of the
who's
Headless Horseman.
harassing around,
Yeah.
killing people.
Well, the figure of the Headless Horseman came from a lot of different European backgrounds. It wasn't just the Dutch, because we had the Dutch settlers there, and we had a lot of German settlers up there. It didn't just come from them. There was also an Irish version. I'm sure every European country has their version of the Headless Horseman.
Right.
Interesting thing is some Headless Horsemen are evil. They come after you to collect your soul. They're almost like a specter of death. And other Headless Horsemen are actually quite benevolent and are there to warn you to, like, hey, knock it off. You're going to end up like me, headless, riding around for the rest of your eternal life. So the Headless Horseman that Washington Irving wrote about obviously was more on the evil end.
Right.
I did like what Tim Burton did with his Headless Horseman. First of all, Christopher Walken and Ray Park provided the body for him. Which was a good combination. Ray Park's more the martial artist. It's Darth Maul. That's who he's famous for playing. And then you had Christopher Walken with his dancing background. I think both of them. I mean, I can kind of tell now when Ray Park's doing it and when Christopher Walken's doing it, because they do have a bit of a different style in their stance.
Definitely in the confrontation on the bridge. That was Ray Park.
That was Ray Park, yeah.
They're very close physically in their movements, so I'm certain that they were coached on how to bring some kind of continuity to their body language.
Well, Ray Park is a stunt double. That's where he started. So I could see how it worked. And they both having backgrounds in movement. I loved the fact that Hessian, he was out there looking for a head, but not just mindlessly looking for a head. There was a little more of a backstory, which I thought was great. So you get this. So Ichabod Crane is sent up to Sleepy Hollow to investigate these recent deaths.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which everyone attributes to the Headless Horseman. He's going in there a total skeptic. I wouldn't say he was as superstitious as the character in the original story. I think he was kind of trying to be anti-superstitious, to the point, like he wanted to prove all superstitions were either the truth behind the superstition or he wanted to prove them false.
Yeah, that's what one of his character arcs was, coming to grips, reconciling his dedication to scientific pursuits and the acceptance of reality, balancing that with getting to know somebody like Katrina. Here's, all about studying up on the supernatural and all that. Basic witchcraft, which usually something like herbs and using tinctures and stuff like that, and folk remedies, that sort of thing.
I'm wondering if they based what the stuff that Katrina was on was what the Pennsylvania Dutch practiced.
Yeah. What, hoodoo?
The hoodoo, yeah. I wonder if they based it on that, even though it was two different cultural things.
Yeah, exactly.
There is a lot of similarities there. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, hoodoo, it's also called powwow, and I'm not talking about the Native American dance.
No. Powwow is definitely something different.
This is something different. It is a type of, it's almost like a European version of voodoo. It's a mixture of Catholicism, some of the spells and things you could even trace back to the Nordic Viking beliefs. They have a character that comes around during the winter who's this old hermit, and he shows up at your door, and he's to test to see if you would be hospitable to him or not. And if you look at where that character came from, it's actually a representation of Odin, but it's so far removed that it's one of these Christmas figures. That's the type of folk magic I was thinking they're trying to say that the Van Tassels, Katrina Van Tassel, was doing. Kind of a stretch. I mean, she's in Sleepy Hollow, New York, and the type of folk magic I'm talking about was in southeastern Pennsylvania. Kind of aside, but look up a great documentary in a book, The Murder of Hex Hollow. Very intriguing.
Murder of Hex Hollow? Very
intriguing documentary about a murder that happened due to these folk beliefs. And not because somebody thought, ooh, witch, kill them. No, it had everything to do with what they thought the outcome of the spell was supposed to be and what it wasn't. And it's an interesting... it's a very interesting documentary. But yeah, she was practicing more of a folk magic.
Yeah.
She was using a lot of, chalk symbols. She was using herbs, like you said. And here comes Ichabod,
Yeah, she was using a lot of sigils and stuff like that.
And here comes Ichabod trying to be an intellectual, trying to be scientifically minded, which was a nice contrast. And really, I did like how they set up the Burton movie to be, it was more of a mystery. The thing was, what you expected it to be, probably Brom dressed up like the Horseman all the time, committing these acts. I mean, if you read the story, that's what you're thinking when you go into this. Somebody was dressing up the Horseman, using the legend to commit these horrible acts for their own gain.
Commit these murders.
Yeah.
Well, that'd have been, something else. If Brom, turned out to be a serial killer.
Yeah.
Or somebody,
Right. Instead, we do get, it is the Headless Horseman.
Yeah.
They are killing them, but there is somebody that's still using them. Using
Right.
the Headless Horseman for their advantage. And boy, I should have seen it coming. I mean, all the characters I'd seen her play up to that point, Miranda Richardson. I mean, Queenie.
Miranda Richardson.
Queenie.
Oh,
She played
yes.
Queenie.
Oh, yeah. Elizabeth I and
Yeah. In the Blackadder. I love the way she played her. Of course, we've seen her in so many things after that. My favorite now is...
recently in Good Omens.
In Good Omens. Loved her in Good Omens. Loved her in Good Omens.
As the medium.
And the medium who only on Tuesdays. She also ran a bit of a...
Right.
She was a bit of a harlot on the other days of the week. Irving, when he first wrote the story, was writing about the legends in the area. Uh-huh. So the legend of the Headless Horseman existed prior to him coming to that area. And the reason he moved there was, New York was going through its 10th cholera epidemic, I think it was.
Yeah.
It was some sort of horrible disease like that. And he had enough, so he just said, I'm going to take off to the Hudson Highlands. Mm-hmm. And he settled in Tarrytown. Now, what's interesting is Sleepy Hollow officially did not exist till 1997. Did you know that? It was a section of Tarrytown.
But didn't become its own town.
But it didn't officially become Sleepy Hollow until 1997. And that was because they had so many people coming up wanting to see Sleepy Hollow and not realizing it was a district of this town. It was like, when we lived in Syracuse, we'd go to Armory Square. It's a small little area of the bigger city. Well, that's what Sleepy Hollow was. It was a small area of Tarrytown. And then they finally just gave it its own name.
Okay.
Which is kind of interesting. It's always been that, but it was officially known as North Tarrytown.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, if you get a ghost story, run with it. I mean, the entire town did.
That's a good way to get tourism.
Yep. And the town that you see in the movie was totally constructed, as were the woods, were totally constructed on a soundstage. They did an amazing job.
In England?
It was done in England, yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I do remember watching the commentary where they said that fake woods, by the end of the shoot, got so many real animals in it, it almost became a real woods. The bird song would get so loud that the ADR people were just flipping out,
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
I love hearing about stories like that.
Yeah. Now, Washington Irving, his other famous story, Rip Van Winkle, was also based on, legends in the area as well. But overall, what were your feelings about Sleepy Hollow? I mean, kind of...
It was entertaining.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's watchable. It's rewatchable. Mm-hmm. I think that's what makes a really good movie in my books.
It was just as violent as those Hammer films.
Oh, yeah. And, of course, I could easily digest, what everything else that was going on, Mm-hmm. Between Ichabod and Katrina and his getting to know all the other characters in the town and bringing all that together into the plot, into the overall narrative that leads to the discovery that it's Miranda Richardson all along, and she's got the Headless Horseman's skull, and she's using that as something to... I thought it was interesting that she had the entire skeleton.
Yeah.
Why just the head?
Yeah, that was interesting.
Well, I think once she took the head out of the grave, that's what called the wraith forward. Mm-hmm. And then this wraith form comes out in the form of the Headless Horseman's spirit, since she's got that part. She's got his head,
right?
And to make him whole again, he's got to have his head back.
Right.
That's one of the plot devices in the story, is that this need to make the Headless Horseman whole and end the haunting.
That's the same from the original story, too. He was constantly looking for his head that was blown off by a cannonball during the Revolutionary War. If you've seen Glory, you know what we're talking about. I mean, that was Civil War, but... You
don't need to be hit by the ball necessarily.
Nope.
The concussive force alone will scramble all your soft tissues. Mm-hmm. You might be wearing a helmet, but your brain doesn't have one.
Right.
You know.
No, I enjoyed it. I think it's my favorite Burton film, actually. I mean, I loved Beetlejuice, and I loved Edward Scissorhands, and I even loved his Batman. But I think it's Legend of Sleepy Hollow is the one I enjoy the most. He not only brought his style to it. A good example is, you know, when the Headless Horseman does get his head back. You get that lovely claymation style remaking of his head, you know.
Oh, I love that.
Oh,
that was.
It's kind of hokey, but it works, you know.
He falls out of frame
Yeah.
as it's happening, and then he suddenly jumps back into frame, and his eyes are bugging out, and he's all blah, 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 you know.
Yeah.
It's funny.
So you got the Tim Burton definitely there, but it's like Tim Burton really said, I'm going to direct a Hammer film. Because it really feels like a Hammer film.
It does.
And Hammer films are also very good at setting up the English style of country horror. American style country horror is, we've got usually some stuck-up rich city folk who cross the wrong backwoods inbreds. That's American country horror, and I find it kind of find it distasteful. I mean, the movies might be entertaining, but really it's kind of distasteful.
Yeah.
I like the British country horror, which you got two types, really. You've got the something bad happens in the manor house, which if you've watched any Midsummer's Murders or Jonathan Creek, I mean, my God, Midsummer's, that's the entire series. Believe me, if you did the per capita murder rate, Midsummer County, this fictional Midsummer's County in England is worse than Baltimore. Anyway, if you don't know what I'm talking about, look it up. It's on Netflix. It's a great series. But it's that typical, here's your cast of characters, and usually there's a manor house involved or some church involved, and some bloody murder, creative bloody murders happen. Mm-hmm. And so you got that type of English horror. But then you get the other type of country horror, which the best example is The Wicker Man, where you get the outsider that comes into the country. It's not as adversarial as the American version of country horror.
Yes, exactly.
There is some adversarialness in it, but the country people aren't usually the backwards hicks. They're just living a different type of life. Or they know about the place, they know about the actual horror and the supernatural, and they try to warn these outsiders. And of course, the outsiders aren't going to listen to them. You know, think of the legend. Think of The Haunting. You know, I'm talking about the TV series, not the either movie. Although the movie is more of a manor horror, both of them.
Right.
If you look at the TV series, they were told right off the bat that this place was haunted. There was some weird stuff going on with it. They ignored it at their peril. Granted, you know, the skeptic I am, then be like, oh, it's haunted, let's get the furnace checked. And if the occurrences still occur after finding out I don't have a carbon monoxide leak, okay, now we gotta worry. But you know.
Yeah, check for carbon monoxide leaks.
Yes.
And whether or not you're smelling methyl percaptan anywhere.
But that it's that same thing with Ichabod. He comes into the country situation. He's got all these great ideas. He's the metropolitan guy. Mm-hmm. And he basically does not want to listen to what they're telling him, which is there is a headless horseman that is out killing people.
No, he's a horseman, and he's headless. No, yes, we tried telling you.
Yeah, exactly.
He's really just trying to take it all in.
Yeah.
You know, after seeing it, when the character that was beheaded right in front of him by the headless horseman, and the head collected. That was this thing. He was collecting heads. Bit of an obsession with decapitation and heads. I'm sure there's a technical term for that somewhere.
Now, as for his portrayal of upstate New York at that time, I don't know. It was set to be a gothic horror, so I don't think they set out to be precise. That's why when people were complaining about the anachronisms that were in it, it's a horror fantasy. It's a gothic horror fantasy.
Yeah, I know, and we could split hairs about the anachronisms ourselves, but I'm not going to go into that.
No, so
I find it easy to overlook.
So that's why you don't have the old Dutch church there, which is an actual location in Sleepy Hollow. Yes, you have a covered bridge, but it's not the covered bridge that the Headless Horseman is considered the Headless Horseman Bridge, which is, again, is really in Sleepy Hollow. So they weren't setting out to make an exact replica of the village at that time. They weren't setting out to make a historically accurate piece. It's a fantasy piece. It's a horror piece.
Again, a movie based on a book.
I mean, at the end, he quotes New York, New York, the song. You know, come on. It's a fantasy. Deal with it. just enjoy the
Yeah,
ride.
exactly.
Just enjoy the ride. And I did.
The Bronx is up and the Battery's down.
Yeah, exactly. That's the line. But you could say they were kind of influenced by the Hudson Valley School of Painting, though, for some of the set designs, especially when you finally get to see some color. You know what I'm talking about, the Hudson Valley School. Mm-hmm. Maybe you should explain it for people who didn't take art history.
Oh.
Or maybe I should look it up.
Yes, I think so.
The Hudson Valley School, from my remembering...
It was a regional.
It was a regional style of American art.
Uh-huh. A regional style of American art that was very popular then.
And it was full of landscaping. There's some right there.
Oh yeah, it's beautiful stuff.
Yeah.
The thing of it is,
the Hudson River School. I'm sorry, the Hudson River School. Yeah, not the Hudson Valley School.
The thing of it is, there is a landscape artist in England who's painting at this time, during that time period, early Victorian, and I can't remember his name.
Starts with a W, right? Are we thinking the same person? No. Oh, okay. Because there was that guy who did that wonderful ship, and the sunset looks like it's burning behind it. Mm-hmm. And I can't think of his name, but all I know is it starts with a W.
Well, it's very lovely work.
Yeah, but basically the Hudson Valley School is people painting these beautiful landscapes of the Hudson Valley, of Niagara, of a lot of beautiful places in upstate New York. And you can see some of the influence. Just go ahead and check out the Wikipedia article for some good examples. But you can see some of the influence. Like, oh, well, look at this one right here. Doesn't that kind of look like the village in the movie?
Yeah, it does kind of.
Now, this, in case you wonder, we're looking at a thing called Mount Washington by John Frederick Kessett, painted in 1869.
Kensett. Kensett.
Yeah. All you'd have to do is just darken that up, and you'd have basically the set that they used in the movie.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's very similar to those landscape paintings that were coming out prior to Van Gogh was a member. Van Gogh?
The Impressionists?
The Impressionists, yeah. It was pre-Impressionist.
Pre-Impressionist.
And where you would see these landscapes, and they were very atmospheric, and that's what you see at the Hudson Valley School. But the landscapes are mainly New York images. Mm. Mainly. There are some that aren't, but you can definitely see the influence. But I do think that was a bit of an influence too. But it fits well into that Gothic style of horror because it is so atmospheric. They were much brighter, obviously, but like I said, all you just, if you wanted to put a different filter on that one, suddenly you have the village scene from the movie. So I guess that's it for the Sleepy Hollow movie. We did like it. Mm-hmm. It is one of my favorites.
Well done. It had a pretty good script, very good acting in it. Mm-hmm. It was very well done technically as well.
Yes.
Even with the quirky bits.
Right.
With some of the special effects there, it goes right in along with the story.
But it fits. And as for its place in upstate New York, well, like I said, technically it's not upstate by my definition.
Well, at the time it was.
But at the time it was, and it is one of those things that New York can say, this came from us, be kind of proud. And it didn't come from the city, it came from a small little town sitting there on the Hudson River, which is neat too.
Which is its own...
Exactly, yeah. So I guess we could say, it's an honorary upstate. I don't know if people in Sleepy Hollow and Tarrytown would like to be called upstaters or not, but... They should be proud of being Hudson Valley because it is a beautiful part of the state too. It is gorgeous, and they get things like once in a while seals, and they get some interesting visitors sometimes from come up through the New York City, and I'm talking about the ones that swim up the Hudson, like the seals last year. So
that's right.
Albany. Yeah, if we ever do cover the Hudson River and some of the weird cryptid sightings, just keep that in mind. It's connected to the ocean, folks, and sometimes things get lost. So
those seals, I don't know if they'd be able to find enough food to be able to winter.
They were doing pretty good in Albany.
Mm-hmm. What happened? They moved off, didn't they?
I'm not sure if they moved off or they had to get somebody out there to get them back where they needed to be because some
marine biologists out there to pick them up and bring them back out to the bay.
I mean, you're right though because that's not really where they're supposed to be. No. It's kind of cool seeing them, but you get back to the open ocean.
Yeah, that's where they really belong.
So, all right. Well, I guess that's the end of our Patreon today.
Thank you for listening to our Patreon podcast.
If you're hearing this and you're not on Patreon, we have released this publicly. So I hope you joined our ramblings.
Yeah.
And have a good night.
Good night. And wherever you are. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for listening to Unearthly Upstate. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Patreon, and on our webpage. We are also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, Podbean, Google Podcasts, and CastBox. Please like, share, and review on your favorite platform. Unearthly Upstate is an Animator Liar production. The show is produced by Mari and Matt Manette, with purring provided by Honey and Lloyd. Research and writing by Mari Manette. Music is by Kevin MacLeod, licensed under Creative Commons Attribution 3.0 license. Unless otherwise stated in the episode, the places mentioned in the broadcast are not paid or contact us for any type of promotion. Please check out our webpage for credit and sources for the episode. Thank you.